Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible game we'll be showing from the Tata Steel Chess India edition. It's from round 2 and it's Vincent Keymer versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov. We've already seen in the previous video that Nodirbek is the leader after the first day. Out of the 3 games he won 2 and drew 1. Unlike his game against Pragnananda, this one is it could go either way up until the very end. So it's a very strong game. Both of them just playing engine move, engine move, engine move. It's really crazy, and you guys will love it. It's a really nice fighting game. So Vincent Keymer with white opens with pawn to g3. He starts it off with a sort of a king's fianchetto opening. We have knight to f6, bishop to g2, and pawn to d5 by Nodirbek. Sorry about that. We have knight to f3 and pawn to e6. We have castles and pawn to c5. So this is as hyper modern as it gets. Playing with your pieces, only the pieces are controlling the center, and the Nodirbek, the old-fashioned way, we're gonna control the center with our pawn. So it's a nice clash of two styles. We have pawn to c4 and bishop to e7, basically inviting pawn to d4, but Nodirbek doesn't want to play into it. He goes bishop to e7. C captures, E captures, and pawn to d4. We have castles, and here D captures on c4. It's maybe not the first move you think of, because you're just helping black further increase the mobility of the bishop. But Vincent has plans of playing a3 and pawn to b4, and he will force the bishop to move, and then his bishop will occupy this diagonal. And if this bishop will come to this diagonal, then it makes sense to move this pawn off of d4. So that's the idea. So D captures on c4, bishop captures, and pawn to a3, preparing pawn to b4, pawn to h6, and striking with pawn to b4. We have bishop back to e7, and now knight to c3. Interestingly, the position has already been reached, and with Nodirbek playing the black pieces, but it was played last year against Wesley So, and Wesley continued with bishop to b2. Right away, but here we have knight to c3 by Vincent, and it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. So let's see how it continues. And in that game, Wesley actually defeated Nodirbek, so it's hard to say if Vincent knows about that game, but both of them are playing really quickly. So I imagine they are still, maybe not completely within their preparation, but they know, of course, what's what. Knight to c6, bishop to b2, bishop to g4, just nicely developing. We have rook to c1 and rook to e8. We have pawn to h3, chasing away the bishop, bishop back to e6, and now knight to a4, preparing knight to c5. So the knight left control over the e4 square, knight to e4 by Nodirbek, and knight to d2. Of course, the knight is very strong. You want to get rid of it as soon as possible. Bishop to g5, preventing the knight from moving, but that is exactly what Vincent does. Knight captures on e4. And this is only the first attempt in this game of Vincent trying to sacrifice the exchange, and Nodirbek declines. He just plays d captures on e4. The idea of capturing the rook is not terrible, but then comes knight f6 check, forcing you to mess up your pawn structure, and only then after queen captures on c1. I mean, look at this beautiful dark square bishop, look at the queen. Not something, I mean, it doesn't appear that black is the one playing for a win here, even though he does have the 2 rooks. So after knight captures on e4, Nodirbek just captures on e4, offers a queen trade, queen captures on d8, we have rook a captures on d8, and pawn to e3, nicely developing, blocking the bishop on g5. We have pawn to f5 by Nodirbek, and knight to c5, attacking the bishop and the b7 pawn, and of course bishop to c8 is the only move that solves all of your problems. So pawn to h4, bishop to e7, and now you could consider a lot of moves here, like pawn to g4 is very nice, weakening the e4 pawn. You could also go something like rook to c2 and double up on the c file. Basically, all of your pieces are excellently placed except the rook on f1. So naturally, Vincent develops it. Rook f to e1. We have bishop to d6, preparing maybe some ideas like pawn to g5, then pawn to f4. We have bishop to f1, trying to improve the position of the bishop. Here on g2 it's not doing all that much. On c4 it would be a tremendous piece. Bishop to e5, offering a trade of dark square bishops, and now bishop to c4 with check. We have king to f8 and rook to e2. We have bishop captures on b2, rook captures, and now knight to e5. The knight now looking to come to f3, and the bishop back to not to f1, bishop back to e2, countering the knight, similarly to how this bishop is countering the knight on c5. So very nicely done by both of them. Pawn to g5 as planned. We have, well, not captures right away. First, rook b to c2, doubling up on the c file. And now you have to be very careful. The rooks must at all times defend the bishop on c8. Otherwise, it could be very interesting. G captures on h4. And now, not the immediate recapture, but Vincent first goes for bishop to h5. And, well, what I said in the previous sentence, the rooks must remain here at all times to defend the bishop. Or maybe they don't. What you could play here is definitely h captures on g3. You could try giving up the exchange, and after bishop captures on e8, g captures on f2 with check, and after, let's say, king moves or king captures on f2, then you capture on e8. And okay, it's a nice position. Black would be up 2 pawns, but white would be up the exchange. So you could definitely play it. In the game, rook to e7 by Nodirbek, and now, well, what we said, the bishop has now been weakened, knight captures on e4. Seems like a piece sacrifice, but not really, as the bishop on c8 is hanging as well, and you cannot allow that. So bishop to d7, and now the knight moves back, knight to c5. And with this little skirmish, Vincent has won himself a pawn. We have bishop to c, and also the b7 pawn is hanging. So bishop to c6 defending, and only now g captures on h4. And if you count the pawns, Vincent is now up a pawn. We have rook to g7 with check, king to h2, and now king to e7. Interestingly, rook to g2 check doesn't do all that much for black. Yeah, it'd be great if the king went to h1, but after king h3, there is no good follow-up here, and white is just winning. So after king h2, king to e7 by Nodirbek, and now rook to g1, offering a trade of rooks. We have rook captures, king captures, and now bishop to d5. Bishop back to e2, again nicely controlling the knight, and pawn to b6. Chases away the knight from c5, knight to d3, offering a trade, and rook to g8 with check. And now king to f1. If you look at the clock times, both players are now below the 1 minute mark, and well, the position is far from simple, or far from over. Bishop to g2 check. We have king to e1 and bishop to e4. Nodirbek playing with you know, engine-like precision. Here we have rook to c3 and rook to g1 with check. King to d2, and now knight captures. Sorry, not knight captures. Bishop captures on d3 was played. Bishop captures and rook to g2, putting pressure on that f2 pawn. King to e1, and now king to f6. We have bishop to e2, and now rook to h2. Here the move to hold the position is rook to g1 check, and only after bishop to f1 then you go rook to h1. Here after rook to h2 it's just not the same, and Vincent finds it immediately. He plays pawn to f4. Probably Nodirbek thought that, okay, maybe h5 is played, and then I have rook to h1. But here after pawn to f4, it's a much different story. Now the knight is hanging, so where do you move the knight? We have knight to g4, and now pawn to e4. And the question is what to play here. Of course, you cannot capture here. The knight would hang. Maybe you can play... What can you play? It's a very tricky position. If you play rook captures on h4, which was played in the game, then a problem appears out of nowhere, seemingly. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the absolute best move for Vincent, the only move that wins him the game, while I give you a couple of seconds. The move is not rook to c6, which was played in the game. The move is actually pawn to e5, and the reason for it is that, well, let's say pawn to e5 check is played, let's say king e6 or any other move, doesn't really matter. Now rook to c6 also comes with check. So you played one move with check, you played two moves with check, and after king to d7 you play bishop b5, and now there is no stopping white. That's all there is. All the other lines are also winning for white. For example, if king d8, you will just give a check, and then if the king moves again, now the pawn marches forward, and that's pretty much it. But in the game, rook to c6 check was played right away, and this is now much different, because after king to e7, yes, you can play e5, but it doesn't come with check, and then black can just make a move, like for example pawn e5, knight h2, and if you try rook c7 check, king d8, you don't have any of the tricks that we've shown in the previous setup. So after king to e7, e captures on f5. We have knight back to f6. Okay, now it's still up a pawn, but it's a doubled f pawn. Rook to e6 with check, king to f7, and now bishop to c4, threatening some nasty discovery. So quickly unpinning, we have rook to e7 with check, king to h8, and rook captures on a7. Vincent wins another pawn, and now he has a passed f pawn, but also he could very easily create a passed a pawn. Rook captures on f4, attacking the bishop, and now bishop to e6, defending the pawn on f5. Pawn to h5. Nodirbek now also has a passed pawn, and he starts advancing it. If you guys are interested in the objective evaluation of the position, the engine says pretty much anything you play here is a draw. So that's what the engine thinks. But if you look at the position, when you have a pass pawn marching forward, if you ever played against a pass pawn marching forward, you know that that's far from equal. Rook to f7, attacking the knight, knight to g4, and now rook to f8 with check. We have king to h7, rook to f7 with check, king h6, and now rook b7, going after the b7 pawn to put pressure on the king on h6. Pawn to h4. We have rook captures on b6, and now look at this. Pawn to h3. There are no good discoveries because none of Nodirbek's pieces are in dark squares. Yes, the knight and pawn are, but you cannot reach them. So rook to b8, trying to get behind the king to stop the passed pawn. Pawn to h2, and now rook to h8 with check. And it seems that we're going to have a peaceful resolution here. King to g5, and now what you have to play is bishop to d5 to really control that queening square. But I feel Vincent was still playing for the win here. He played king to d2, and it is now Nodirbek who is winning. Vincent was winning at some, maybe in the middle of the game, and then in a couple of other possessions, but he was always the one that was pushing for the win. And now all of a sudden on move 61, the tables have turned. Nodirbek is winning. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Nodirbek Abdusattorov while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this tricky idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight to h6. Once Vincent saw this, he immediately resigned, as there is nothing more to be done here. Now, the rook does not control the h1 square, so the pawn is queening, and you don't have bishop to d5 because rook to d4 check just wins the bishop. And that's why king to d2 was such a huge mistake. There was no way to recover from that. And even if you don't, if after this knight to h6 move, you can't even go rook to g8 check. So there's really nothing to try here, and of course it was a good move for Vincent to resign here. And yeah, for those of you who haven't seen my previous video, here are the standings. Nodirbek is the leader with 2.5 points, followed by Narayan and Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen with 2, with 1.5 point Nihal Sarinda, Neil Dubov, Arjun Erigaisi, Pragnananda with 1, Vincent Keymer and Vid Gujarati with half a point. And I'm sure you're wondering how am I not showing a Magnus Carlsen game or a Daniil Dubov game, as they are also playing in this tournament. Well, Magnus had a pretty slow start. He did beat Vidit in 64 moves, which is really cool, as this is chess we are talking about. But it was a really slow Berlin defense game where he was just nurturing his advantage up until the very end, and then defeated Vidit in a queen and pawn endgame, which is very incredible and instructive. But I'm pretty sure we've seen Magnus do that many times. And Daniil had pretty docile games. If we take into consideration what we consider a Daniil Dubov game. So, well, I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow's games. These are the ones that I've prepared for today. If you feel like I've missed one that's really incredible and we should show it, definitely use that hashtag suggestion. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Gordon Solars, Amir Hossein, Daghan Manshadi, Jeffrey Johnson, Yusuf Avalin, and Dan McCormick for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on this wonderful event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.